Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Kate Schwanhauser and I am the Special Events Manager here at Food and Water Watch. And I want to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Looks like people are still taking a couple minutes to get logged in, but I'm just going to go ahead and get started with some welcome remarks while everyone logs in. Thank you again for joining us this evening for our event, Overcoming Climate Anxiety. This event is part of our monthly event series. So for those who are new here, we first started hosting these webinars every month last May. And I want to thank everyone who has joined us over the past year for all of those. I'm glad to see so many returning names in the audience tonight. And I'm really excited to share that we are launching the series this year as our Livable Future Live, our monthly education series. So this is a way for us to keep connecting every month, to keep learning more about fights to protect our climate, ensure access to clean, affordable drinking water, and fights for a sustainable food system, along with other important topics like tonight or discussions about current events. So we wanted to start the year off with today's topic of climate anxiety because we know that the work that we're doing is hard. It's hard to read in the news about climate change, climate denial, inaction in Congress, the latest extreme weather disaster or fire or flood. It's hard to hear about all of that and still feel energized to keep up this fight. And so I'm sure everyone here has felt overwhelmed or anxious about climate change at some point. That's probably why you all signed up. But you've come to the right place. Our guest speaker tonight, Dr. Lise Van Susteren, is an expert on this topic, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have in a few minutes about what climate anxiety is and how we can address it on both a system-wide and a more personal level. So before I bring her out, I'm just going to go through a quick couple of housekeeping remarks. So first up, just some Zoom reminders. You can all use the chat box to share your thoughts during the webinar. It's also where we'll be putting in some useful links for you throughout the discussion. So keep an eye out on the chat box for those. We'll also have some time for Q&A with Dr. Van Susteren. So if you have any questions that you think of as you're listening, please use that Q&A button that you see in the toolbar on your Zoom screen to submit those questions for Q&A. And we also have a poll that we'll be doing a little bit later this evening. So when I launch that, you'll see the poll pop up in your sidebar and you'll be able to submit your answer. And so we can all see everybody's results to the question that we'll be asking. And finally, I'm recording this evening's webinar, so I will share that out later with all of you and everyone else who RSVP'd. So as I mentioned just now, today's webinar is part of Livable Future Live, which is our monthly educational event series. So every month you can join me here on Zoom for a new discussion, and we have some exciting topics lined up for you for the next few months. So next month on February 16th, we'll be laying out Food and Water Watch's roadmap for 2022. We have some really ambitious plans for the year ahead and beyond. And so we'll share what those are, how we'll achieve them, and how you can be part of it. And we'll hear from our Executive Director, Winona Howder, sharing some of those strategies for this year ahead. Then you can join us in March, on March 22nd, which is World Water Day, so we can have a discussion about the work being done to provide clean, affordable water for all. And we'll have a really special guest speaker, Maud Barlow, joining us on World Water Day as well. April 22nd is Earth Day, so you can join us for a virtual summit to learn more about how we can work together to protect our planet. So my colleague Madeline is going to put some links in the chat for you, and you can use those links to sign up for any of these upcoming events. And I'll also make sure I send out all those links to you in a follow-up email this evening. So I hope that you will join us in these next couple of months. So many of you here tonight are members of Food and Water Watch. And as you know, we work to mobilize people and communities to build political power so that we can fight for the solutions that we need to protect our climate, our food, and our water. And it's your support as members that allows this work to happen. It allows our organizers, our policy and legal experts to work at the local, the state, and national levels to fight for bans against factory farms, to keep our water clean and affordable, to fight against the fossil fuel industry, to protect our climate, and so much more. So I just want to thank you all so much for your membership and your generosity, because it is what makes this work possible. And related to that, I am excited to share that we have 5 copies available tonight of our guest speaker, Dr. Van Susteren's new book, which is titled Emotional Inflammation: Discover Your Triggers and Reclaim Your Equilibrium During Anxious Times. And we will be giving those copies away tonight through 2 different drawings to show our appreciation for all of you. So there's 2 ways that you can enter to win a copy. So the first, for anyone here today who is already a member of Food and Water Watch, so that's anyone who's made a gift of $50 or more in the past year, or anyone who gives monthly, I want to thank you so much. And you will automatically be entered into a drawing to win a copy of this book. And so we'll pick 3 winners from among our Food and Water Watch members that we will be sending a copy of the book out to. And so the second way that you can be entered is for anyone who's new here, for anyone who would like to become a member of Food and Water Watch tonight. We will be picking 2 winners to send a copy of the book to. And your membership supports our work on the ground and at the national level to protect our climate and communities. So if tonight you decide to make either a one-time donation of $50 or more, or you sign up to become a monthly donor of $5 or more, you'll be entered into this drawing to win a copy of Emotional Inflammation. And I'll say that monthly donations are some of the strongest support that you can give. It's the fuel that we need to tackle the big long-term projects like passing bold federal climate policy and blocking new fossil fuel projects across the country. So if you don't already give monthly, I encourage you to sign up tonight. And again, we'll be selecting those winners after the webinar is over. And so I'll reach out to our winners by email to get your mailing addresses. So please, everybody, keep an eye on your inboxes tomorrow to see if you've won. And my colleague Madeline is going to put a link in the chat for you as well. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Lise Van Susteren. She is a psychiatrist and expert on the mental health impacts of climate change. In 2011, she co-authored a report titled The Psychological Effects of Global Warming on the US and Why the US Mental Health System is Not Adequately Prepared, which is one of the first reports on this subject. And she's also the author of the book that I was just talking about. And Food and Water Watch has been working with her on Capitol Hill to get a hearing on the impacts of climate change on the mental health of children. So she's truly leading the way on how we think about and address climate anxiety, both on a national scale and on a personal level, by helping people develop strategies to use in their own lives. So welcome, Dr. Van Susteren. I'm so glad that you're here with us this evening. So thank you so much.
Call me Lisa. Thank you, Kate. It's just delightful to be with you. We are all so appreciative of Food and Water Watch. Winona Hodder is a good friend, Mitch Jones, who has been helping with the legislative work, and of course, all of your supporters. And the kindred spirits gathered here together tonight. You know, this is our family.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I have so many questions for you, and our audience has sent in a number of questions in advance too. But I want to start this conversation by sort of going back to the beginning for you. So I'm curious, when you first started realizing that there was a connection between climate change and mental health, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I'll be brief because I can get so long-winded, but I ran for public office. I ran for the US Senate in Maryland in 2005, 2006, a little known fact. Ben Cardin won, and it was during my campaign that I really began to see the impacts of climate and how much it was affecting and would affect us, and of course, physically, the world physically, and of course our health, and by derivative, our mental health. And then Al Gore had his training, and he invited the first 50 to participate in his training in Nashville, and I was off and running.
I love it. And so, you know, we often hear the phrase climate anxiety in the news. We're reading about it a lot more. How would you define climate anxiety?
a lot of my colleagues get real fussy about whether it's eco-anxiety or climate grief or this or that. And I have to say that I don't think that we really need to be too fussy about what it means, because we all have a sense of what anxiety is, and we all have a sense of the disruption of climate that the climate is bringing. So climate anxiety is the unease, the distress that we feel about what scientists and the science is telling us is coming and what we are already seeing. And I would make the case that if you don't have climate anxiety, you aren't listening. So we're, in my assessment, this is not the right way to say it, but I'm going to anyway. If we were going to diagnose anything, because people often say, oh, is this a diagnosis? No, it's not. I would say it's climate denial disorder that we should be diagnosing. Climate anxiety is a good natural reaction to a real condition.
Yeah, I love that about climate denial being the disorder that we need to be focusing on. And so I think, related to that, I know that you have been working on Capitol Hill to sort of bring this issue in front of members of Congress. Could you tell us a little bit more about, what it is that you're trying to do and why it's so important that we do call attention to this on a national scale?
I twist my arm. I was the expert witness in the Juliana case. Some may know about that case, the 21 youth plaintiffs and Jim Hansen, who sued the federal government for inaction on climate. And in the aftermath, I have to say that it essentially changed me forever. I did the psychological evaluations that are sealed of the kids. And I'll never sort of be the same hearing about what was going through their minds. So in the aftermath, I became very focused on what was happening to kids. And I realized that even though these things seem so obvious to those of us who are in the at the very sort of front row of these things, a lot of people don't realize, and particularly don't realize, that a whole generation of young people is terrified, they're angry, some of them are in despair, and they are absolutely bewildered about why we're not taking greater action. So I wanted, and as I say, Mitch Jones has been helping. We've got more than 60 organizations that have signed on to have a hearing in the Senate or the House or both on the psychological impacts of climate disruption, with particular focus on kids.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And we'll get to this in a little bit, but a lot of our members here tonight have asked a lot of questions about youth in particular, especially, the young people in their lives and how they can, help them. But in relation to this hearing, what are some of the changes that you think that we need to make at the national level to help give more resources and support to people who are experiencing climate anxiety?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it's very obvious. I'm a mental health professional. I tend to treat existing conditions. And I think that that is a huge problem that many mental health professionals have now, and our associations have, which is that, going on the broken end. I remember talking about Katrina when I ran for the US Senate, and I was saying, after the flood and the levees have broken, it's, we're picking up broken pieces. The time to act is and the preventive side. So the idea of hearings is to bring to mind, in a very acute and a very sharp way, to the minds of legislators who might not otherwise realize the extent to which the kids are suffering. And the idea being that if you know that people are going to be hurt, that you take the steps ahead of time, so that you're not spending your time cleaning up, you're spending your time on prevention, which is, of course, exactly what we've been trying to do in Build Back Better and all of the other efforts on the Hill recently. So that's the idea, and it's the transition that I hope that my colleagues will make in going from treatment to prevention.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of senthe You've also been.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. We could say that about all health issues. It drives me nuts that the medical field is more focused on symptoms than on causes. we should be out there advocating. And I'll just add this, that I'm about to submit an action paper to the American Psychiatric Association and maybe the other organizations through psychologists and social workers to request that a subspecialty in climate and mental health be organized or established so that we have specialists who are looking at these problems and advocating for policies, who understand climate disruption and can see what policies are going to be best, so we can assess where the greatest needs are and how to address them with a preventive eye.
Mm-hmm. And is that one of the activities of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance? I know that that's an organization that you co-founded. So how does that play into all of this?
We have a number of different projects. One that we're real proud of that I think people will like is called the Ecocyclopedia. And that will be everything related to climate and mental health that you can go to, and it will be written in ordinary language. If people want to get more complicated, they can go to resources that we'll have there. But we have the Ecocyclopedia. We have the Climate Aware Therapist Directory now for people who are looking for therapists, because we've had problems with therapists who, if you go in and talk about climate, will say, oh, well, you know, maybe it's a control issue, or maybe you have problems at work or something like that. And you're thinking, they're saying this to people? I mean, this is real. But one of the things that I'm really excited about is the project in our outreach and advocacy committee, which is a joint project of the Climate Psychology and Climate Psychiatry Alliances. We plan to reach out to every state legislature, their committee on environment or health, and request a hearing so that we can give that same, our version of an inconvenient truth, I'm saying with some grandiosity, on the emotional toll on kids. And then our ask, which will be in the same with the federal government, is for a task force to be organized to inventory both the weaknesses of a particular region, or in this case, a state, so that you can see if there are dangers to the supply chain or a particular demographic or extreme weather events, line up on the other side with all of the strengths. The idea being that in doing this, rather than hitting them over the head that you have to talk about climate and solutions, what they will see is, oh my gosh, this is where we have a weakness. But here is where maybe you've got a great academic institution, or maybe you've got a corporation that could do something, or maybe it's just a government that's very responsive, so that we can start talking about solutions. People like to be on task forces. It doesn't cost much money. We can have a template that goes out to everybody. So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer to get us into a bipartisan effort to look again at strengths and weaknesses and how to solve problems.
Yeah, I think that's great. And if there's already so many resources available, just making that well known to people. And so this state level work, this is really focused in on youth. Is that right?
The work that is being done, you mean the hearings that we're looking at? It is with a special focus on youth, and there's a reason. Because first of all, they are the least responsible, and we've often heard the first and the worst, but the cumulative toll of extreme weather events and climate disruption and the prognosis for the future is going to rest squarely on their shoulders. And they know that they are not the real complicit ones. They know that an older generation has been, whether we're so guilty of doing it intentionally or not is a different story, but we have the power to make the changes. So it is really a segment of the population that really has the moral high ground in saying, how can you do this to us? Look at what you are doing. You are hurting us. And they can address this intergenerational, some people say injustice, but it's intergenerational aggression too. And that's the hidden secret about inaction. This is intergenerational aggression. And I don't like to say it too easily in a big crowd. I've said it to psychoanalysts who get all in a kerfuffle which you wouldn't expect them to, but they often do. They don't like hearing about things that they're unconscious of, but it's true. If you know you're hurting somebody, which we do, and we're not taking action, that's aggression. So that's why special focus on kids.
Yeah, and this is something that we've gotten a lot of audience questions about is, how can we make this a more intergenerational movement? How can older generations support younger generations, in dealing with climate anxiety, and talking to them about climate change? Do you have any strategies around that?
Well, yes, everybody comes we all come in different flavors, and our interests are very different. And some people are on the front lines with kids, teaching them in schools to love nature, helping them plant gardens, taking them out in the woods. Other people are involved in great efforts to restore environments with kids. And some people are in protest getting arrested and urging the kids not to be arrested. So there are many ways that we can participate. For me, I see as the pinnacle of what we can do, because we have the power. And I'm not saying everybody should do this by any means, but for me, heck, I'm living in Washington, D.C. This is where the sausage is being made. I've got to get out there and roll up my sleeves with the sausage makers. I see action on policy as being the number one activity that I can engage in that is going to make the most difference for kids. But there's a whole range of efforts. And what's most important is for us to do what really makes us feel purposeful, because that will be sustained and it will come across as authentic. And kids need to feel that we're in for the long term and that our involvement is authentic.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Kids are so sharp, and they need to know, they need to trust that you are fully in this with them, and support them. So I think,
as a matter of fact, I also see the effort to have these hearings as a sign and a signal to kids, if not something stronger, that even though we haven't been as successful as we would like to be with policy, we're sure going to make as much noise, good noise, as we possibly can.
Yeah, that's great. I think getting all this awareness raising that you're doing is so critical to continuing to move the needle on this. I want to turn a little bit now more to the individual level. And so talking a little bit more about your book, Emotional Inflammation, because I know that that's a place where you really do start to talk about some of these strategies for recognizing and addressing our own feelings of climate anxiety. So I'm wondering if you could just give us a quick pitch about what the book is about and what prompted you to write it.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to sound shamelessly self-promoting, but it was a curious thing. I've certainly written papers here and there, but I've never written a book. But I got lucky and got involved with this wonderful co-author, Stacy Colino, who's written a bunch of books before. My brain kind of works like a pinball machine. It bounces off here and there. Stacy is just great in being able to, she's very articulate and tons of energy and very enthusiastic. And so she really could drive the creation of this book. Boy, did we have fun writing this. And every time I'm in a webinar, something like this, or an appearance, and I grab the book out, of course, to try to, get myself back up to speed. It's sort of like getting ready for an essay test. And I think, oh yeah, that's right. That's true. We had so much fun writing about this book, and I'll tell you why. It's all about things, and I can be as negative. I can out negative just about anybody. I'll talk to you about the 9 tipping points and tell you all the morose things that come out of my mind, talking about how close we are to the edge. Then I read this book and I get so excited because there are so many wonderful things that we can do. And it starts to make me think, oh, we're getting there. People are talking about this. And they're going to see these opportunities appear everywhere. And in fact, once, I mean, COVID, you know, if we turn the corner, which eventually we will do, but we saw with COVID, despite so many dark things and so many wonderful people making the sacrifices that they did, that people began to realize how important nature is and how restorative it is. So just very briefly, the book is all about a person better understanding the emotions that he or she has about climate disruption and about what the triggers are. And I got triggered just recently by someone, and I went back and saw what it was that it did. It's very practical. And one part that I really like a lot is that there are the reactor types, which you'll talk about, which is very helpful in understanding why and how other people are acting the way they do. So the other aspects of the book, the one that I love the best, restore. Do you want to go through the
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Let's talk about
that. There's review your emotions. It's a restore program. Review your emotions is R. E is evaluate your triggers. S is stabilize your body's natural rhythms. T is think yourself into a safe space. O is obey your body. And TSTOR is reclaim the gifts of nature. And last, of course, is exercise your power. So I already went through review and evaluate, but stabilize your natural rhythms is all about the glorious force and power of our circadian rhythm, and seeing how our bodies are designed by nature, and the whole animal and plant world also responds to a circadian rhythm. And we kind of defy it with we absolutely defy it with all our artificial light and our devices and things like that. And
cell
so
phones and iPads late at night. Yeah,
exactly. So have a look, stabilize your natural rhythms, think yourself into a safe space. Just in a word is what you think of or how you think will determine the feelings that you have. And the inverse is true. The feelings that you have will determine the thoughts that go through your mind. And there are so many ways for us to recognize that the way we think, and this is cognitive behavioral type thinking, and it is reframing, we can actually, knowing that we can turn our feelings in a different direction by having specific thoughts, is a very empowering action. And there are all sorts of tips in the book about that. Obey your body. Oh, this is such a fun part. The gut microbiome is filled with almost 4 pounds of microorganisms. And we used to think it was just bacteria and viruses and everything, and it was senseless. We now know it's the second brain. It is intimately involved in synthesizing neurotransmitters that determine our mood. So serotonin, 90% of it is coming from your gut microbiome, the bacteria there. Proclaim the gifts of nature. For me, is the pinnacle. And we can start with awe, and that nature inspires awe. Awe gives us those alpha waves that put us at peace. They give us, and perhaps some of you are familiar with Shinrin Yoku, the Japanese movement. Your blood pressure is lowered, your breathing rate is lowered, your heart rate. There are things that are called phytoncides that we're unconscious of, that we inhale, that are very potent, have very potent effects on our immune system. Then there are fractals. I don't know if you know what fractals are, but they also give us alpha waves. It's the ratio that is consistent. It's like leaves. You get a little leaf, same shape, same ratio, but it gets bigger. Our brains are processing this unconsciously, and they're telling us that we are in a balanced area, that and we can feel safe there because everything is orderly. Now, we don't know that, but much of what happens to us in nature is unconscious. Then there's the effect of water, psychoacoustics, hearing water, seeing an expanse it's called attention restoration, when we see vistas that are not overly stimulating, but just present a soft fascination. This is all a healing effect to our psyches. So I can't say enough about the fun. And then there's the night sky. You know, we don't look at the night sky or we can't see it, but that's in there too. So then exercise your power. That's all about us being activists.
That's awesome. Thank you. It's so fascinating the way that our brains and like the neurological process really plays a role in this. Like even what you just said about hearing water. When I have trouble sleeping, I play water relaxation sounds on my phone and it just works immediately.
Well, see, this is the thing, Kate, and this is what's so much fun, and why the book was so much fun to write, is that it's like the most incredible jigsaw puzzle. Evolution forced on us a certain design based on the experiences that we were having. So the way we are designed is to nicely fit with everything about nature, including even that exercise, for instance, gives us all sorts of reward center activations. So we continue to do it because it's good for us. So it's just sublime. It is so much fun.
I love that. I want to talk about another thing that you mentioned briefly, which was this reactor type concept. And so for everybody who is on the webinar tonight, we sent you a link for a quiz that you could take in advance that you could learn a little bit more about what your reactor type is. So I'm actually going to go ahead and launch a poll really quickly so that if you did take that quiz, you can submit your answers to the poll and let us know what your reactor type is. I took the quiz and I got a mix, and I was the highest two categories were nervous and revved up. So some people might also have gotten a mix, so feel free to pick more than one response in the poll. Oh good, we're getting in lots and lots of responses. Seeing a high number of nervous reactors, a high number of revved up reactors, then retreating and molten are showing up as answers as well. So will you tell us a little bit more about each of these types and sort of what that means for each person and some of the different strategies that you have for them? I have some slides that you shared with me and I'll pull them up. And so the first one is nervous reactor, if that's a good place to start.
It is. And people should recognize that this is not an exhaustive profiling of people, but it hits, I think, the main points, the loudest notes. So the nervous reactor, you probably can surmise, and there you have the various points. The inflammation, emotional inflammation generally just means, as it suggests, that you have whatever emotion it is, that there's an inflamed, you know, it's hot, it's red, it's uncomfortable. So the nervous reactor is certainly self-explanatory. When there are incidents that are distressing, you're going to react in this nervous, worried sort of way. And the interesting thing is that we don't always know what's bothering us. I certainly, even as a psychiatrist all these years, I'll sometimes think, what in the world is driving me now? And I have to kind of rewind. So there we are, news or fears that have a distracting effect and can sometimes even hide what some of our fears are that are more deeply buried. So that's your nervous reactor. The revved up reactor. And
I've got a lot of revved up reactors in the audience tonight, including myself.
Okay, well then we're in good company, because I'll confess that I am also a revved up, but I'm a mix. So I'm a revved up. Here we have it. You have the frantic hyperreactive form of emotional inflammation. You sometimes have a lot of balls in the air and they drop and hit the ground, which is true of me. An endless list of things that you feel that you could, should, or must do, and you're probably telling yourself that you should be moving or acting faster than you are to change the status quo. Time is running out is always the feeling. Committed to righting the wrongs of the world, which means you have strong energy and goodwill. And I'll also add that sometimes what happens, and this is true of me, is that you forget that it is all the contributions of all of us that are going to change the world. It is not just one of us, but it's all of us contributing. And it's the cumulative addition, just like votes on election day, that are going to account in the end. It's not an individual voice, but all of those votes matter. Revved up reactor. Okay, where are we? Okay, so revved up a reactor. I don't know if I should read that or not, but I will. Oh, we did the molten. I'm sorry, the molten.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
ahead of me on the slides.
Molten reactor, as the name suggests, and Stacy and I went kind of back and forth on whether we should say angry or molten. But anyway, she thought molten was more had more imagery. But your emotional inflammation is marked by irritation, maybe even anger or indignation. The Lord knows I have that too. So we've all got a mix of a little bit of everything. But the feeling of being embattled, shortchanged, frustrated, fed up, the world is a mess. And on any given day, of course, we're going to be feeling these more or less. You may find yourself susceptible to occasional bursts of outrage, sarcasm, or righteousness. Certainly true. I can't say that it's foreign to me. The retreating reactor. Okay, so your emotional inflammation is marked by a tendency to freeze, detach, withdraw, zone out, or numb yourself. You may believe that what you feel or do doesn't make a difference, which can create a sense of powerlessness, depletion, despair, and or resignation. The news can make you feel physically and emotionally spent, unmotivated, and unfocused. So you want to review before I make my reveal, before I do my reveal?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I really like these reactor types because I've also used them in other instances, not just with climate. And I realized that it has helped me understand not everybody has the same style of dealing with stress. And I have found myself pounding on the door of one of my kids because I'm a revved up reactor, and she was kind of, or still is kind of more likely to withdraw. I'm pounding on the door saying, come on out. I want to know, we need to talk about this. And it really is for a person who it needs to reduce his or her stress by withdrawing a little, it's not helpful. And these kinds of stylistic realities help us to work better with each other. So I used to be a 2, which is the revved up. And then I would go into my, okay, forget it, withdrawal phase where who cares? It's not going to make any difference. I'm going to whatever. But I have found that I've sort of migrated in the last 2 years. I've become a revved up and molten type. So, you know, I'm revved up and angry because I'm scared. And fear often presents itself as anger. And we need to know that when we see the country polarized and people showing anger, often what it means is they're scared. They're scared of being insignificant, of not being heard, of being minimized, of being sidelined, etc. It's important to know that anger can cover fear. And that's where I am.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. We actually had a really interesting audience question about just that. It was, you know, is it okay to feel both anxious and furious about what's going on? So that's great to hear that that is, you know, all part of this process and completely normal. And yeah.
And that some people need to head for a garden or for a long hike or something else to restore themselves, and they will be more likely to engage in activities that might be solo or are kind of low impact. And we need to make room for people to work out their recovery from what are very stressful times.
Do you have any tips or strategies for how people can help, find out what it is that's going to work best for them when they are feeling one of these types of reactions?
Well, it is such a wide range, but there is something that works, again, better than anything else. And that's when we go home. And when I say go home, I mean to our evolutionary home. And when we are out in nature, and I'm saying, contrasting this with going in a garden to, working a garden or working with kids outside, because I mean that when we return to living our lives consistent with the way we were designed to live, with setting a circadian rhythm, with having foods that feed our microbiome so that we don't have inflammation, but instead have neurotransmitters that are involved in evening out our moods. And when we are sensing things unconsciously when we're out in nature, whatever it is, the acts that reduce the tension that we feel by hearing noises that are made by humans, where our amygdala, which is the fight or flight center in our brains, are stimulated. And instead, we might hear birds or the sounds of water, as you said. Mm-hmm. All of these things tell us that we're safe. So there's nothing better if you want a full meal of what will make you feel better. It's really living our lives consistent with the way that we were designed. It's like I'm looking for the right analogy, but we wouldn't use an expensive computer or laptop as a doorstop. And in some ways, I think to myself, this is the way we're using our bodies. We're really quite crude in the way we use them, and expect that we're going to continue to have them in really great working order. So I hope that's an answer, because there isn't a one size fits all answer to your question.
No, I think that's perfect. And I think it just sort of, relates back to all of those strategies that you were laying out in Restore. And I will plug on your behalf that your book, Emotional Inflammation, goes into these a little more in depth. So we are going to be giving away 5 copies of those. And then outside of that, if anyone is interested in learning more, you should definitely make sure that you check out Emotional Inflammation. I also wanted to ask you a little bit about that last E, exercise your power, a little bit more, because when we had talked previously, you had mentioned that there is also, so our brains have like a neurological response to, volunteering with a group or doing some sort of activity where you feel that you have purpose. So wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that E. Sure. And then at the end of tonight, I will share a couple ways that you can exercise your power with Food and Water Watch.
Excellent. Okay, so once again, evolution is in play, and it's a survival strategy for us to want to be with the group, because we are more likely over the eons to have survived if we could find the shared work and protection of the group. So here's what we know, that the neuroscience, which is it's so crazy. This is what I mean about the fun. It's just that it always works out, that the pieces always fit. So we have certainly many things that we can do personally to reduce our carbon, our planetary footprint, and should do. And we can go online and easily calculate our carbon planetary footprint and do what we can to reduce it. And then we're really great advocates, because we're not hypocrites, and we're not thinking at the same time we're saying we should be doing the right thing, that we're not doing the right thing. So that's a big plug for our personal work, and for the fact that whatever we do contributes to what everybody else is doing. But here's what we know, and that is that when we engage in behaviors with other people, that's the magic sauce. And what happens is that that's where you get awe, A-W, really E-awe, that feeling of being a part of something bigger than yourself. You start to forget about yourself and you start being lifted up. And there's a transient feeling of connecting with something larger than yourself. And it used to be called the Spirituality Center. It doesn't have anything to do with religion. But what it does, now we have the studies that show it, is that it helps our bodies produce substances which reduce inflammation in our body, so they keep our bodies healthier. They activate reward centers, so we want to keep on doing it. And it even activates, it goes from reward centers, the activities that we do with a group, to opioid receptors. So those opioid receptors are the brain's natural painkillers. So what happens is when you're throwing those sandbags, as a part of a team for a river that's rising, this is your sense. This is the parietal lobe of your brain. And it's a very specific spot that tells you you are doing the right thing. You are participating in an activity that drives to the benefit that is for the benefit of all. Body knows what it's doing. We knew how to do these things. And fortunately, when we engage in them now, we can see and feel that benefit. So when that's one thing that is particularly interesting that I find, which is the most potent, because when we do things together, it sustains us. But there are many other things that we see in the brain, as I mentioned earlier. When we are in places that are calming, our fight or flight centers become deactivated, and we are able to have activated many of the other centers that give us a true reparative psychologically, because it's a cellular reparative effect in our brains. And that's what makes us able to recover from stress more quickly. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, awe. When you are experiencing awe, you're more generous. You're likely to be more altruistic. You're much more open-minded. So it inspires, elicits all sorts of reactions that are life-enhancing. So you can see the benefit to society of engaging in group activities with kindred spirits. So right up your alley there with Food and Water Watch.
Exactly. It's one of the things that I love about this community is that everyone who's here tonight, everybody who's part of Food and Water Watch is so passionate, and it's just really incredible to be surrounded constantly by people like that. So I want to also pull in a couple of our audience questions that we've gotten in advance and a couple from tonight. And so we've gotten a couple on a similar theme, so I'm going to kind of paraphrase and combine them. But a few people are asking, isn't climate anxiety, both normal, and is it also even a little bit useful for moving people to action?
Absolutely. And a very, very good point. There is, I don't know if it's been released yet, so I might be just kind of turning the corner up on on material that we know to be true now. And that is that it really, the people that are the most active, the most passionate, and are out there doing the most, at least obvious work, are the ones who are the most anxious. So in defense of all the years and I was making people anxious and I was being told to stop making people anxious, fill them with hope. That's not the issue. The issue really is that the messaging is critical. And that is that you want to make people anxious. So we're good if we're anxious, but we have to pair that with actions that we can take so that people don't just sit there feeling climate anxiety. But we know, and there are famous studies that show, pair the message. It's a two-step process. Here's the danger that we are in. It's imminent. Here's what you can do about it. We use it in health messaging all the time. You're not going to say you don't have cancer because you don't want a person to feel upset. You got to tell a person got cancer. You got to tell them it's an aggressive cancer. How are you going to get them to get chemotherapy and radiation and all the rest? You know, it's unconscionable. You have to say, this is what's happening, but here's what we can do about it. We've got the protocols. So you capture the energy of that anxiety and you redirect it into action. So yes, to climate anxiety.
Excellent. And I think, you know, you kind of also touched on a couple of other sets of questions that people had been asking is, you know, how do we talk about climate change with our friends and family without making them feel overwhelmed and anxious? And it sounds like, you know, this is that middle ground is finding, you know, you can talk about it. It is stressful, but offer some action steps that people can take.
And I'm going to say that sometimes if I've been in a bad mood, I've been at the random dinner party where I was irritated that people were saying, oh, I'm flying here and flying there. I know people have to use airplanes. I know we do. But it sometimes bothers me when it seems, not anymore though, this has changed. This is a few years ago when it seemed that people were quite oblivious and wouldn't talk about climate. And if I'd bring it up, I'd shut the whole dinner party down. And I was once even met by a neighbor who, when I appeared at the Christmas party, said to me, and don't bring up climate right away, because I really did know that when I started to get frustrated and angry, I would start to trot out all this material. So I was using it to sort of have my catharsis and show anger. So it can be very complicated, these messages and messaging. I'm not always good about saying, here's the problem, here's what we can do about it. You know, I've got a 2x4 behind my back that, you know, I'm always thinking I'm about to use, and it's not good. We need to help people to direct them to constructive action.
And I think that kind of leads into a similar vein of questions that we've gotten from a couple of people is, you know, climate denial is real. There are people in all of our circles who, you know, might not necessarily believe the science behind climate change. Do you have any strategies or recommendations for either how to talk to those people, or, you know, if that's not a conversation that's going to be productive, how do you then sort of deal with what that does for your own anxiety levels?
First of all, your choice. Studies show certainly that if you bring up the facts with them, which is what we're inclined to do, functional MRIs, brain scans, show that what you are hitting is not their cognitive part of their brain, not the thinking part of their brain, the emotional part of the brain. I go like this because it's the back part of the brain. It's the oldest part of the brain. They're just getting their emotions stirred up. More facts aren't going to do it. Sometimes you can get them to empathize with you and bridge a gap because you have things in common with them, and they begin to see you more as a fully formed human and not just a person trying to convince them of something, and that can help. But you know, Al Gore has said that the deniers are retreating faster than the glaciers. But I will also say that these days, I believe that denial really is a form of resistance. And I know that being a psychiatrist although these many years, that sometimes people are continuing to deny. It's a face-saving move at this point, because they denied in the past. Now they're not going to say, oh, I was wrong, you were right. Yep, climate really is a problem. It might be that they don't want to think of the world as being so vulnerable. They can't tolerate that the world could be on a collision path with a disaster. Sometimes they belong to a group that would ostracize them if they were to disagree. Sometimes their incomes depend on it. Sometimes they're dominated by somebody who insists that they have to deny. So there are all sorts of reasons why people deny this, or let's say COVID. And sometimes they're the same people. So it is simply a defense mechanism. Do not think of it really as a person who is carefully analyzing the data. That's not what's going on. So up to you whether or not you want to engage in that. I once said to a person, it was actually a physician a number of years ago, who said something about, oh, climate, it's a hoax or something, this a number of years ago. And I said to him, I looked at him, I said, you know, I know it's really hard to contemplate the kind of danger that we're in. And he was really annoyed with me because, of course, I was being very supercilious, looking down, and I couldn't help it. But your sarcasm comes out sometimes, as we saw in the reactor types. So you could be forgiven.
For the reactor types, we have a few questions in as well. And, I think you've touched on this a little bit, but a lot of people, got, a mix of different types. So people are asking, is that normal for them to mix? And do people sort of like change and move through different types at different periods of their lives?
Yeah, it is kind of a surprise to me, because I was sort of, as I was looking over the reactor types just in the last couple of days in preparation for this, or should I say today, that I used to be sort of a 2 and a 4, which was the hyper one, and also the retreating. And I'm not much of a retreater anymore. I'm more of a molten. I'm not sure when that happened. I suppose family members could identify particular times when it seems like things have shifted, but I'm getting more angry because honestly, I really did think we would run the numbers when I started doing this like 16 years ago. I thought we would this shows the naivete about human nature. And that's somebody who studies human nature. I thought we would run the numbers. We would see we can't get past 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide. And that'd be the end of it. We just start doing. Where was I getting this idea that we were essentially just driven by data? Human nature is much more complicated. We deny all the time to protect ourselves in ways that are particularly injurious. And we have a very self-destructive side to us that is unconscious.
Yeah.
So I went from a 2-4 to a 2-3. Who knows what it'll all be like when we meet next time.
Yeah, but I mean, we're constantly evolving as individuals. And so I think that makes total sense that at different
and on any given day or period in your life, you're going to find yourself in a different place. I certainly long to be a 4 again, the withdrawing type.
We are coming up on our time here. I feel like I could keep this conversation going for like many more hours, but I do want to be respectful of people's time. So I want to ask if there are any final closing thoughts, anything else that you want to share with us this evening.
A big thank you to everybody here. I think we forget sometimes how many of us there are. And just as there are climate tipping points, there are social tipping points. And we are getting closer and closer. We don't have to convince everybody. Famous Harvard professor, Chenoweth, her name is, 3.5% of the population, she says, in the streets, and you've got nonviolent overturn of government. So I'm not looking for overturn of government, but I am saying that, as there's a famous economist who says things take longer than we ever thought they were going to, and then they change faster than we ever could have imagined. So here we are, shoulder to shoulder. We'll keep on trekking.
Awesome. I love that. And I think that is so true about our members here. This is just such a wonderful community, and we're so glad that you're a part of it with us. So I want to thank you so much for your time this evening. This has been such an informative conversation. I love all those tips that you shared with us. And I'm excited for some people to be able to get a copy of your book so that they can dig into those a little bit deeper. And I want to thank everyone else who's on this call again as well. I said this earlier, but for me personally, it really helps to know that I'm not alone in this, and that I am part of such a strong, passionate community who are so dedicated to protecting our planet and leaving this world a better place for those who come after us. So I appreciate you all so much. And I do just want to end with a couple of ways that you can engage with Food and Water Watch. So one thing that I will share with you tonight is that if you are interested in volunteering, we have a lot of volunteer opportunities for you. I know a lot of our volunteers are here with us today. So thank you all so much for your support. And there's texting and calling opportunities that you can do right from your home when it works with your schedule. We also have a new Climate Liaisons program that you can sign up for, and you get trained on how to build a relationship with your member of Congress and advocate for climate solutions. And then finally, you can connect with an organizer in the region where we have local campaigns. So Madeline is going to put a link in the chat for a form that you can fill out to let us know what types of volunteer opportunities you're interested in, and we can help get you connected. I'll also share that you can connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and this is just a great way to stay up to date on the news, learn more about the issues, and help amplify our message, as well as, have conversation opportunities for many of the folks who are here tonight. If you would like to become a member or a partner, we are so grateful for your support. I've seen a number of donations coming through this evening already. So I want to thank everybody who has contributed tonight and welcome you all to your Food and Water Watch community. So your support is truly appreciated. And again, those of you who are making donations tonight, those of you who are current members, you will be entered into that drawing to win some of the copies of Emotional Inflammation. So you can make a one-time donation or become a monthly donor. And again, those monthly donations are a really great way to support Food and Water Watch in the long run and help us with some of our long-term goals. So whichever one you choose, we'll put a link in the chat for you to do that. And finally, I hope that you'll join us at future events. This webinar tonight is part of our Livable Future Live monthly virtual education series. So you can join us here again next month and every month thereafter for the rest of the year to take part in these types of conversations. So we've got a few events lined up for this spring already, and we'll put the link in the chat for you to sign up for any of those. And I'll also make sure that I share those in our follow-up email. And then finally, we'll send you a quick post-event survey. So we like to get everybody's feedback at the end of each of these events, just to hear what it is that you like about them, what we can do better, and just continue to tailor the program around topics that you are most interested in. So please do fill out that survey and let us know your thoughts. So with that, we have reached the end of our time together. I just want to thank you all once more. Thank you again, Dr. Van Susteren. This has been fantastic. So I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and I hope I'll see many of you again next month.